Wolfpack, what's going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Roto Street. RotoStreetJournal.com, we breed and feed you fantasy wolves here with a phenomenal annual tradition, one of my favorites every year. That's when we get together with Walter Football, Mr. Sam Factor over there, and make our bold predictions. We've had varying results over the years. Last year might not have been our best. The year before, we knocked him out of the park, though. So maybe we're on that Deebo Samuel every other year trend here, and we're due for a real good one. Sam, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. It's the best time of year. We're peak of draft season, and they're bold predictions for a reason, right? We're not going to hit on all of them, but if we hit on a few every few years, I think that's a good sign.
Exactly. And the good thing we do is we at least make bold predictions we truly believe in as well, that we really think these ones have a good shot of hitting. We're not just going bold to go bold for no reason. And we're going to just dive right into it, guys. As you listen, if you enjoy what you're hearing, of course, thumbs up. Always help us get out to more people. Those likes, those shares, the retweets, all the good stuff. Thank you again so much for being here. I'll kick us off right now with a bold quarterback prediction, and that is Jayden Daniels will be a top 6 QB, and he ultimately runs for over 800 yards while chucking for 4,000 yards as well. And this one does ultimately just boil down to the Konami code upside. You guys have probably heard of this one, but rushing yards are 2.5 times more valuable than passing. Rushing touchdowns, 1.5 times more valuable than typical passing scores. And over the last 10 years, any quarterback with at least 100 rush attempts has gone 89% top 12, 59% top 6, and 41% in the top 3. So sounds bold to say top 6 for Jayden Daniels, but really a 59% chance of hitting that, assuming he hits 100 carries. In 21 instances over that decade, those quarterbacks have averaged 20.3 fantasy points per game. There's just so many. You can keep going down the list. 700 plus rush yards. All of them have finished top 9. And you just look at Jayden Daniels. I mean, this guy in college averaged 4 more just straight up rushing points than Anthony Richardson on their college profiles. And we see Richardson going round 4, round 5, and Daniels going round 10 right now. I don't mind Richardson. I think it's a great upside pick, but why not take the guy with a similar profile? Yes, they're built very differently. We got more of a Lamar Jackson build here with Jayden Daniels, whereas Richardson's more that Cam Newton beast style. But this was a guy that ultimately threw 3,813 yards and 40 touchdowns through the air, 72% completion percentage. So yeah, he might have the legs and the rushing upside of Anthony Richardson, but Daniels can really sling this thing as well. So I'm a huge fan of this combination. You get a Cliff Kingsbury offense. I know the horizontal raid, people call it, not the deepest of air raids, but he did lead the league in pace and no huddle rate over his 4 years in Arizona as well. So you know there's going to be a lot of plays run. You know it's going to be a fast-paced offense. And Kyler Murray, quarterback 6, quarterback 5, and quarterback 10 in points per game, ultimately had a quarterback 3 season in total fantasy points 1 year there. And between Terry McLaurin, the weapons aren't crazy, but I love McLaurin as a number 1. If I was going to give a second bold prediction for wide receiver other than what I'm already going with, I'd say he's got a real shot at finishing as a top 12 wide receiver here. So ultimately, I just love banking on this upside. You can take Jayden Daniels round 9, round 10. And then if you really feel nervous about it, Stafford, Kirk Cousins, they often don't get drafted in these redraft situations because no one really wants to waste the roster spot onto QBs. So I ultimately love Jayden Daniels. Again, top 6 QB, 4K passing, 800 rushing, goes bananas as a rookie.
Nick, I like this one. I have had a bold prediction over the course of this offseason, similar to this. You already mentioned the Anthony Richardson stuff, which I love. That Jayden Daniels just straight up outscore Anthony Richardson this season. And the case against it, right, is not the rushing yards. I do think Jayden Daniels has a pretty good chance to get more rushing yards than Richardson. It's really the rushing touchdowns. Richardson, he's out there with the Josh Allen, the Jalen Hurts in terms of the rushing touchdown ceiling. He's one of the best goal line players in the NFL, which is why he's getting drafted where he's getting drafted. But you already said it. Jayden Daniels was a better quarterback in college than Anthony Richardson. We've only seen 2.5 games in the NFL from Anthony Richardson. We've never seen Anthony Richardson be an accurate passer. I still think he's a good fantasy player. But the difference with Jayden Daniels was basically built in a lab for fantasy football. Like they went in the lab, they said, what do we want to build for fantasy football? Outside of the size of Anthony Richardson, he was the most accurate deep passer in all of college football last season. So he doesn't just have the rushing upside, like he has actual big throwing numbers. And really like the rushing stuff in fantasy, I think often gets a little misrepresented, where it really raises your floor in fantasy football, not your ceiling.
Yeah.
The passing with the rushing is what raises that ceiling combination. And that's something I think Jaden Daniels has that Anthony Richardson really might not have. We haven't seen it yet. And just such a small sample size for Richardson compared to Daniels. So yeah, I like this one a lot. I got a quarterback coming up that's also a late round QB. And I think like paves the path a little bit for the late round quarterback strategy hitting this season. Like for me, if I miss on Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, I know that the auction draft were together. I think I got Jalen Hurts. Like I'm in on those two guys specifically. I like Kyler Murray too, but if I miss on those three where they're going in drafts, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to get Jaden Daniels, or I'm going to wait even longer and I'm just going to take Deshaun Watson. And I feel, not great about the risk. The low end outcome here is he's not even playing and it's week 3, right? Sort of what we saw last season. But when I'm drafting, especially this late in drafts, with Deshaun Watson, he's going outside the top 14 quarterbacks in every single draft. He's going to go undrafted in tons of fantasy leagues this season. He's going to be in the waiver wire column in a lot of places after week 1 and week 2. And when I'm drafting, I want to draft guys that I think can win my fantasy football league at every single stage of the draft. And I think Deshaun Watson has a pretty clear story to tell if you squint hard enough and you go back just 4 years. It's a long time to go back. But when you are in your draft in rounds 10, 11, 12, 13, and you're looking at the quarterbacks left and you've gone to the late round quarterback strategy, maybe you grab Jaden Daniels or Trevor Lawrence late in your draft. There's just no other quarterbacks that have had the level of fantasy production in the past that Deshaun Watson has showed. Deshaun Watson had back-to-back fantasy football seasons averaging top 5 fantasy points per game numbers in 2018, 2019, and in 2020. We've seen him be a good rushing quarterback with that passing upside. And then you also take a look at the team he's on. And Nick Chubb's out. He's out for at least the first month. I think we're projecting him in the Walter Picks app right now to come back around week 9, week 10, see a slow ramp up. It's possible we actually see him even later than that, like huge ambiguous backfield there with the situation with Nick Chubb. I think the Browns are going to be top 5 in pass attempts the first half of this season. They were top in the league in passing with Joe Flacco last year after Nick Chubb was injured. So Deshaun Watson finds himself in one of the most pass-heavy offenses that invested heavily in wide receiver this offseason, got Jerry Jeudy, drafted Jamari Thrash, David Njoku, one of the best receiving tight ends in the back half of the season last year, Jerome Ford, an underrated receiving back, Amari Cooper, one of the more underrated sort of elite receivers since he's been in the league. And all of a sudden, if you squint hard enough, you can see the path to Deshaun Watson being a top 5 quarterback again. It's not like we haven't seen it before. It's been a while, but we have seen it in fantasy football. He's been my most drafted quarterback in best ball this year. I'm ready to get hurt. But again, like I said, the way I draft, I want to draft guys that can win my fantasy football league at every stage in the draft. And I think Deshaun Watson absolutely has a league winning upside. If he can just stay healthy for all 17 games, right? Like that's really the reason that he's getting drafted as late as he is nobody really expects him to finish the season healthy. He did already have a sore shoulder, which I was very panicked about, almost enough to take him off this list, but he's already practicing in full. Right now, he is fully healthy. The second he starts missing practices, I'll fully be, panicked and tanked and probably dropping him in fantasy leagues. But until then, like he has top 5 quarterback upside. He's going around 12 plus. I think he's a great upside pick late in drafts.
I love so much about the argument Ken Dorsey bringing that Bills style spread attack and the pass rate, the ecosystem all around him has definitely vastly improved and suggests that if he pans out himself, like there's absolutely the narrative. And Kevin Stefanski, I really do love him as a mind as well. I think it's going to be 2 great coaches, a good line in front of him, and the weapons, as you mentioned, all have improved. I just have zero faith. As you mentioned, 4 years is a long way to look. It's a really hard squint. And I loved Deshaun Watson when he was with the Texans. I had him as a rookie that year. And man, losing him midseason was a gut wrench because he really came in and was just destroying fantasy, flipping it on its head. So I have seen the upside. I know it can exist. It's just been so long since we've seen it. And as you mentioned, like the sore shoulder and not playing in game, it just – to me, it seems like a guy that got his bag and just kind of is quit at this point. And he'll get his 3 or 4 games in to make sure he gets paid another year and something's going to flare up. Maybe not. Maybe he'll prove me wrong, but I just don't see it with him anymore. That's my biggest concern with him for sure.
The thing with him too, and maybe he's a better pick in season long than best ball, but the other last data point I'll share with Deshaun, he played 5 games last season. He was over 17 fantasy points in 4 of those games.
Yeah.
Despite being incredibly inefficient, like horrible version of Deshaun, still he had the rushing touchdowns to get to over 17 points in 4 of the 5 games. But, you draft him where he's going in season long and he gets hurt, he doesn't pan out, you just drop him and you add someone else. Like it's really very low risk at cost. This is a game about opportunity cost, but super high ceiling if he ends up being healthier than people expect.
I think that's a great point too. And that's why when you said he's your highest exposed in best ball, got a little spooked for you. Now, again, maybe it pans out big. I guess that the latest reports too that they might move on from Jameis Winston, trade him. That has me feeling just a little bit better for Watson as well. Only because like Winston's the type of guy a team could rally behind on the bench. And he's such a because Winston's sitting there. Everyone wants to root for that guy. So if he's gone, that does, I think, raise the floor just a little bit there for Watson too. Certainly there is upside. I won't argue that in the system all around him. I do just worry about him, his motivation, and it's been quite a long time.
I'm realizing I didn't even give a specific bold prediction here other than that I was drafting him a lot. The official bold prediction on the books here, Nick, is that Deshaun Watson will finish as a top 6 quarterback in fantasy football this season.
I love it. Bold, spicy. There is a path as well. We'll see if he can follow that path to fruition. Now, I think a guy that is seemingly every fantasy expert's favorite guy this year, but I have to still go on record and make sure everyone knows I love him too. And that's De'Von Achane. And I have a prediction that he's going to finish as a top 4 running back. He's going to be going in round 1 everywhere next year. He's for me, I have him at 16 overall, about 17 spots higher than his ECR, and I am a huge fan of him, especially if you can get him in round 3. That's typically not happening, so I would definitely take him in round 2 and lock in this guy. You could just play a fun trivia game of what crazy De'Von Achane efficiency stats you want to throw out there. The fact that on his first 30 carries at the NFL level, he had over 400 rush yards. Awesome. Great to see. First in fantasy points over expectation, first in yards per touch, first in breakaway, all-time running back leader in career fantasy points per game. He averaged, when he played 10 snaps or more, over 30 fantasy points per game, which would have been the most all-time by anybody. He had 50 fantasy points in his first true 50% plus snap game, and all the talk this offseason. I love this beat writer they have out there, Wingfield, talking about how he got stronger to better withstand the punishment taken. His route running to get the ball in his hands more often has improved, and he called Travis Wingfield. This was the exact quote. I transcribed it from a podcast because I loved it so much. It wasn't even in writing, but I listened to it. I had to write it down. My God, De'Von Achane's going to have a monster year. He's here. He's there. He's everywhere. The guy is doing so much with his game, his usage in the passing game, how he himself circled that as something he can improve upon to get a piece of the pie of this dynamic offense that has oodles and oodles of skill players who can beat you and burn you and score on you. I think Achane, maybe he's the receiver 3. I'm watching this guy line up in the slot, run a slot fade, cook a corner. The pacing, the lineup, the stem, everything is just all there. This might be the next Christian McCaffrey in terms of overall versatility and general usage. Pass game, run game, big play waiting to happen. It's totally wild and something I haven't seen before. Guy's going to be a freaking superstar is how he wraps up his quote. And so again, just one maybe a homer take from this beat writer, but ultimately we just know when he got volume and withstanded it, he blew up. And now it's just a matter of, can he stay healthy? He didn't really have any injury concerns at college. I know he's a smaller frame. I actually love Jalen Wright too. He's one of my favorite picks. Even if I get Achane or not, I think he's got a huge handcuff upside to be there with him. But assuming that we don't need Jalen Wright to come in, that means De'Von Achane finished as a guy that broke fantasy. And at running back, where you might have McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan, and then you got so many warts now with what you got volume bets with Saquon and JT. And I like both those guys too. But in terms of just who could go bananas and score you 30 points a game, we've already seen it with Achane when he was able to withstand it. That is a big if, but I definitely think in round 2, it's so rare to find a back with this type of upside. So I'm going De'Von Achane, round 1 pick and everywhere next year, top 4 running back season.
Yeah, love this one, Nick. I won't need to add too much because you just nailed that analysis there. I'm definitely in on Achane as well. I think some drafts I've seen him fall to round 3 in some season-long drafts. I think that is an absolute smash. And really the only one last piece of analysis I'll add with Achane that I think is going a little overlooked, because I've seen a lot of people out there as I'm pumping up Achane on the TikTok and Instagram and YouTube wavelengths, people out there saying, this is a super risky pick, boom bust pick. And I really don't view it that way. Even if he's in the exact same role as last season, I think he's worth his current cost. He finished as running back 7 in points per game last season. You might have to maybe deal, if it's the exact same thing as last season, you might have to deal with the 50-point week and then the 10-point week. But ultimately, that's going to end up being worth the round 2 or 3 cost if he finishes top 10 in points per game. But he has this ceiling that very few running backs have. And I actually think Achane's sort of the end of that tier this year of running backs that sort of have the ceiling to be the number one overall running back in fantasy football. You need the touchdown ceiling and the receiving ceiling. He's got it. Definitely a great pick in fantasy this season.
I know. And you have another guy in that tier, I would say. And I think just as a general draft strategy, it's so important to get one of those guys at minimum in those first 2 rounds because it does drop off hard. And especially in redraft, best ball is different, as you know, with the wide receiver economy absolutely going bananas over there. But in redraft, you can get so many good receivers. We're going to talk about a few later in round 6, 7, 8. It's wild how they fall over there. So getting at least one of these guys that really does have the running back one outcome in their potential path, I think is crucial. And you give a really interesting one here with Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, so my prediction here is that Saquon will finish as a top 3 running back in fantasy football this season. I came on here, actually, I think it was the only bold take that hit for both of us last year was my prediction that David Montgomery would finish, I think I said as a top 15 running back last season or top 20. I forget exactly where the bold prediction was. I think he snuck in just barely. This is a very similar thing with Saquon Barkley as it was with Dave Montgomery last season. I understand some of the concerns with Saquon when it comes to the receiving volume, right? Is he going to get the same receiving volume he saw with the Giants? He was one of the larger target shares in the league his whole time with the Giants. Jalen Hurts has not historically thrown to the running back a lot. I do have faith in Kellen Moore, the new offensive coordinator on the Eagles, to get that target share to at least 10% for Saquon and have a potential to get, back to that 15% range that he's been in the past, which would obviously be massive. I also know people are scared of the tush push, which I think both Jalen Hurts and Saquon can both score a lot of rushing touchdowns this season. I'm not that scared of the tush push. I also think a lot of Saquon's touchdowns can come well behind the goal line. And the main reason that I think Saquon Barkley is going to end up winning fantasy football leagues this season, while he absolutely can finish top 3 in fantasy points per game at the running back position, is the same thing we saw with David Montgomery last season. I don't want to underrate the massive efficiency boost he's going to get, going from a bottom 5 Giants offensive line and offense overall to a top 5 Eagles offensive line and offense overall. There's just going to be such a seismic shift in the efficiency we see from Saquon playing in such a better environment in an offense where they actually have to guard other players and think about other players in that offense. We have really not seen Saquon in an offense like that really since Odell Beckham Jr. was on the Giants back in 2014, 2015. I mean, it's been a long time since we've seen Saquon in an environment like this. I'm very excited to see what he can do in this environment, and I really think he could lead the league in touchdowns in this offense. So, yeah, I'm in on Saquon, and I think he can finish top 3 in points per game this season.
Yeah, he's somebody that I've definitely warmed up more to throughout this preseason for all the reasons you cite here, going from the PFF ranked 31st line to now the second ranked PFF line, an offense that scored 7th total points last year, was the Eagles, 30th for the Giants. And I think it's going to definitely be even more explosive with Kellen Moore. And I absolutely agree. The tush push, it is scary. It's going to happen. He's going to continue to score Jalen Hurts there. But you still look at the fact that Swift had 1.5 times as many goal line attempts as Saquon Barkley last year. Miles Sanders had 11 touchdowns and was the running back 12 just 2 seasons ago, and now is complete and utter dust. It's just wild that a talent like Saquon Barkley, $37.8 million. I mean, they're definitely going to want to get their money's worth with this guy. And the last issue that I really needed to see checked off was the receiving upside. And it's certainly not a guarantee. You mentioned that Jalen Hurts has not thrown to running backs very often, but all the beat reports, opening days of camp, there's a quote that I continue to gravitate to. Saquon Barkley was heavily involved in the passing game. He probably had more receptions than anyone on this team, lined up all over the formation. The Eagles ran speed option drills with Hurts and Barkley throughout the practice. So getting that kind of move around usage, the article went on to say they expect him to have a Christian McCaffrey level of impact. Now, I know that's 2 running backs in a row we've cited Christian McCaffrey. There aren't multiple Christian McCaffreys in the NFL. CMC is a one of one. We get it. But it is that interesting usage, the move around, the receiving portfolio growing in that sense would unlock so much for him. So, yeah, I've definitely warmed up to him. He's right into my top 12 picks for the season after being a mid-round 2 guy for a lot of it. The more and more I read and learned about his setup and why it is not as concerning as I might have thought, I'm with you. I think it could be a monster season for Saquon. I love going him and maybe Taylor round 1-2 turn, like running back. I know it's kind of like old school and not what I typically used to do, but if you can get 2 of those guys in that tier and then again hammer those receivers, it's an awesome place to go. So I absolutely love that one for sure. Moving to the wide receiver position. And again, if you're here with us live and you enjoy what you're hearing, the thumbs up button is so greatly appreciated. Great to see some comments, some regulars on in here, get some questions, and I'd be happy to take them all after we wrap up. But moving on to the wide receiver position, a guy that I feel like, and a lot of smart people that I follow and read, they don't seem to like Calvin Ridley at all. So that does have me a little worried. But I see a really, really interesting situation for this guy. He's been the wide receiver 20, wide receiver 27, and wide receiver 5, and wide receiver 20 across his 4 years playing, and is now going as the wide receiver 34. And I think he's in a significantly better situation than pretty much any of those seasons, other than, of course, that wide receiver 5 one. But I think the usage this year might most resemble what we saw in that year with the Falcons. Let's talk about why this is not your usual Titans. Was not Mike Vrabel anymore. Bottom 3 in pass attempts, 5 of 6 seasons. Brian Callahan comes in. He's been top 7 in pass attempts in 3 of his 5 years. Always top 7 in pass rate over expectation. That was even with Jake Browning at quarterback. He's coached Stafford, Peyton Manning. This is the guy that if anyone's going to squeeze something out of Will Levis, who I love his arm, love the raw talent. And so far this preseason seems far more under control. Don't want to overreact to preseason stats and play, but just the way they're setting him up in much more friendly situations to get that ball, get it to the playmakers. We're seeing Ridley be one of those key guys. And they talked all preseason. The quote was, we're going to use him in the Jamar Chase role. And you can scoff, you can roll your eyes. I get it. It's not Jamar Chase here. It's Calvin Ridley. But the usage could be crucial. When you look at Matt Harmon's reception perception, one of my favorite guys out there, he cited the fact that Ridley was very, very good in the top percentiles against man, against zone. But what he really struggled against was press coverage. And ultimately in Jacksonville, all they did was line him up in the static X roll, did not move him around, did not do anything to help free him up there, and just kind of had him run like 2 to 3 routes. And that was it. So ultimately getting a more diverse role, moving around the formation, which we're seeing throughout those preseason games, I think is going to be huge for him. And all the camp hype, in addition to the preseason play, has been saying, one quote I did love was, with every passing day watching Ridley at Titans camp, the more confident I get that the Jags are morons. His usage of last season was a fireable offense. They painted his skill set into a very stupid box. This is a player you force the ball at every layer of the field. Was a quote that I loved. And again, maybe a little biased, a Titans beat writer calling out the Jags at interdivision crime there. I get it. But I just think between the improved usage, I see a lot of similarities here to 2023 Mike Evans, where if Levis can be anything close to Baker Mayfield, we get a more vertical style attack, but a move around offense as well. Just a better, more consistent usage that better fits his skill set. I could see a monster season here. So I'm predicting top 12 season here, a true wide receiver 1 after going as the wide receiver 34 in drafts.
Yeah, I like this one a lot, Nick. And I actually just made a video, I think 2 days ago, about some guys that are going way too late on Yahoo. I did each platform, ESPN, Yahoo, and Sleeper. On Yahoo, in Yahoo drafts right now, Calvin Ridley's going outside the top 90 picks. He's going absolutely insane. And when you look back, people have a really sour taste in their mouth about Calvin Ridley from last season. He was the definition of a start-sit nightmare, boom-bust guy. He had 5 games over 20 points, but he also had several games under 5 points, right? He was just this guy that was really tough to rely on. And I think you could blame a lot of that on like you just said, sort of the box they put him in and the role that he was playing for the Jags last season. I definitely like making bets on this Titans offense, both Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins. I like Pollard and Spears as well, especially in PPR formats. I think this team has like a real shot to be top 5 in pass attempts. I know a lot of people are saying maybe the Falcons, maybe the Commanders will be sort of the biggest offensive shift from last year to this year. I think it's the Titans. I mean, they're going from the Derrick Henry run first era to this extremely pass heavy Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears receiving back era where like they're really going to throw a lot. So yeah, I think there's certainly a ceiling here for Calvin Ridley. And he finished top 10 in air yards last season too. And those are the types of guys. We're about to talk about another one that really pops out when you look at the air yards, but Calvin Ridley, like that, the type of role that he plays, if he does hit, he could be top 10. I like the top 12 to top 12 bowl prediction for sure.
He actually had more top 12 games than Jamar Chase last year. A fun little fact there that a lot of people don't want to realize. It was fancier with Jamar Chase. Yeah, the spikes were bigger. And I'm not again saying I'd rather have Calvin Ridley than Jamar Chase. Just saying there were plenty of booms there. And if that floor studies out with better usage, I think a lot of people are going to remember that guy that was that wide receiver 5 only a couple seasons ago, not too long ago. But I'm looking at an old guy, and you're looking at a young guy over here with your bold prediction, Mr. Ladd McConkey. I'm very excited to hear this one because I do love Ladd, and I'm excited to hear what you got on him.
Yeah, so my bold prediction is that Ladd McConkey is going to finish as a top 24 wide receiver in PPR leagues. And really, when I started my fantasy analysis, digging into the numbers from last season, and one of the first things that I like to do is I like to take sort of all the standard deviations from last season, and I like to try to run 10,000 simulations basically for every single player over the course of the upcoming season. So just like how boom bust were they last year? Let's apply that to this year in similar, based on the base projections on my initial run. And the one guy that really popped out when I did that was Keenan Allen. And I had to dig into the numbers to sort of understand why. And you look back at Keenan Allen's last season, down the stretch, 14 targets, 16 targets, 16 targets, 9 targets, 12 targets. And my takeaway, so he had some massive games too, 40 points, 27 points, 23 points over that span. He had a 45-point game in week 3. I mean, there wasn't very many receivers with a higher ceiling than Keenan Allen in PPR leagues last year. He was just by far the go-to guy. Keenan Allen, obviously now on the Chicago Bears. Mike Williams out of town now. People expect this Chargers offense to be extremely run heavy, but ultimately they're going to still throw at least 50% of their plays with Justin Herbert at the helm. They go out and they sign Ladd McConkey in the first round. Ladd McConkey is a very interesting prospect profile because he did not see a ton of volume and ton of playing time in college. But every time he was targeted, he was incredibly efficient. So he's one of these hyper efficient guys that sort of didn't get enough opportunity. He's been fully healthy through the preseason. A lot of people were wondering, will he be able to sustain a full season at a larger workload? But again, like I was saying with Deshaun Watson, at this point in the draft, and he's going pick 79 on Underdog, but on some of these platforms where the rookies are going later, on both Yahoo and ESPN, he's going around pick 120. I think he can finish as a top 24 PPR wide receiver. If whoever wins out is the clear top receiver for the Chargers, and I think it could be Josh Palmer. I think the ceiling's a little smaller for him if it ends up being him, but it's about as good of a chance as anyone to beat Ladd McConkey. If Ladd McConkey is getting close to 10 targets in a lot of these games, he's going to have 30-plus point weeks, and he's going to have 30-plus point upside tethered to Justin Herbert. I think the rushing attack is getting a little overrated for the Chargers too, with Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, certainly not the most exciting backs in the NFL and one of the most talented, young quarterbacks in the NFL. We also have seen Jim Harbaugh bring out some really good efficiency in quarterbacks in the past, even though he has skewed run heavy. This could be one of the most efficient Justin Herbert seasons we've ever seen. And if that happens, it's going to flow through to some of the receivers. I think Quentin Johnston is complete dust at this point. I have absolutely no faith in him, stealing a significant target share at this point in his NFL career, even though it's already year 2 and they're hoping for big things. Does not seem like he's established himself at all. So I think Ladd McConkey is one of the best high upside clicks in the later rounds. And I totally agree with what you were saying earlier. In redraft leagues this year, I'm almost always leaving the first 2 rounds with at least 1 running back, if not 2, because there's so many of these receivers, really rounds 3 all the way to like round 10. And you're getting Ladd McConkey in round 10 of 12-team leagues right now that can legitimately turn into every week consistent studs in PPR leagues. And I think Ladd McConkey's got a great chance to do it.
Absolutely. Chasing vacated volume has been a huge key to fantasy success these last 2 years. You look at CJ Stroud and the Texans last year. Where did the biggest breakouts come from? Of course, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and they led the league in vacated targets. The year before that was the Lions, and Amon-Ra St. Brown followed that path to a monster season. And no one has more vacated targets than the 395 of the Chargers. And why not Ladd McConkey? If you can find that true number 1 for Justin Herbert, I get Greg Roman in this offense. And it's going to likely be more run heavy, but I think you brought up a great point that the efficiency, I think we're going to probably see one of the best real life seasons from Justin Herbert. Maybe not his best fantasy success. Maybe the arm gets dialed back a bit, but I do think Harbaugh, Roman, they have a run heavy pass, but look at who they were coaching and the offense that was surrounding them. I do think these guys are smart enough to play to their talent. And I know I keep bringing up camp hype quotes. There's some great ones on Ladd McConkey before that Justin Herbert went down. Charles Robinson, pretty typically reserved in his big, bold predictions. He said McConkey was the first name presented when I asked which young guy from the draft that had the staff most excited. The way he gets in and out of his breaks is already high level. I think they'll line him up all over the place, and he'll eventually develop into a target monster. We know we love target monsters. There's nothing better than that type of hype. So I'm with you. And we had Crabtree, Bolden have monster seasons in Jim Harbaugh's offense not too long ago. They were both top 15 wide receivers receivers in 2012, 2013, 2014. So it's going to be somebody. And maybe it's Josh Palmer. I'm betting on Ladd McConkey too because of that great efficiency, like you mentioned. When he's used, he does great things, and he can go all over the formation. So I love this call. I've definitely been scooping up a ton of him right now. So I'm in there with you. I think it's a great one for sure. Last up, wrapping up with our tight ends here, I'm going with Jake Ferguson as my bold prediction. Now, I love getting elite tight ends this year. Trey McBride, if you want to go for Mark Andrews, that round 4 or 5 pocket, I think is a great spot to invest. But ultimately, I think my most drafted tight end is Jake Ferguson because I think he's going to give you that top 5 type of season, but you can get him in that round 7 to 8 price range. You look at the environment for this guy. Cowboys were first in total points, passing yards, pass attempts, and passing touchdowns last year. And that was after starting really, really slow. People forget that through those first 8 weeks, it was an abysmal offense. A lot of people, I was seeing Dak dropped in a lot of leagues. CeeDee Lamb was just the wide receiver 14 through the first 8 weeks. It was not a fertile fantasy environment at all. And then boom, out of the bye, they became top 3 in pass rate over expectations. And this offense started to flourish. And you look at what they have behind the under center. You got Dak, who I love, and then it's Zeke, the corpse. Hey, maybe Dalvin Cook now. Who cares? Rico Dowdle. I don't mind. Maybe an interesting running back, but you can't tell me this team is not yet again set up to lead the league in pass attempts once more. And yes, of course, CeeDee Lamb, now that he's in there, of course, he's going to lead the way. I mean, maybe a 200 target season. Our draft together, I just spent like $75 to go get the guy. Like I'm fully all in CeeDee Lamb. This is not me against him, but somebody's going to have to step up at number 2. And I don't hate Cooks. He's fine, but I really wouldn't be shocked at all if that is Jake Ferguson. Last year, 3rd in total routes, 7th in targets among the position, despite he himself not playing a full-time role till week 6. Ultimately, he notched 5+ targets in 12 games, so a nice, steady option there, and was a top 12 tight end in 60% of his games last year. We saw it with Dalton Schultz as well. Dak really does love to lean on those tight ends, especially in the red zone area. And Ferguson, a lot of people just assume it's like this crusty, boring veteran. This is only his 3rd season. Who says that he can't get better himself? All the talk last year, and this was a guy, again, 2nd in missed tackles forced last year, 6th in yards after the catch. Like, he put some good quality tape out there, and everybody's saying that he, like McCarthy, quote, only scratching the surface. Dak saying the steps this guy has taken are remarkable this offseason. Obviously, you can see this massive jump in the intensity in the way he prepares, and nobody had worse touchdown luck than him. Nobody is due for more positive regression after being pretty high in red zone targets and just ultimately missing on a handful. We saw it with Amon-Ra St. Brown a few years ago, where a couple of those 1-yard lines where they get knocked out flip in his favor. We saw it in the playoffs with this guy already, a 3-touchdown game, like a 40 fantasy point day against the Packers. We could see multiple of those coming this season. So again, in that round 7 to 8 range, which I really think is the last call. If you don't get yourself a Jake Ferguson and Evan Ingram, or potentially a Kyle Pitts, who we're about to talk about in a second, you're looking at garbage. So ultimately, if you want an elite touchdown tight end season for a bottom 8 price here, I think Jake Ferguson is the guy I'm going for.
Love this one again, Nick. I'm sad I don't get to push back on any of your 4 takes that I was able to do on Jahan Dotson last year, but I'm with you on this one. When I saw you were going to be talking about Jake Ferguson, I was excited to talk about him together. He's my 2nd most drafted tight end in best ball this season, only after Njoku, just because I've drafted way too much Deshaun Watson, which is with his own sick thing that we already discussed. But Jake Ferguson's right there at number 2. I totally agree with you about the teardrop. At tight end is extreme. I mean, it's really extreme. Like, really, after Dallas Goedert, you're looking at Pat Freiermuth, who I don't want to make a positive case for. I've seen people do it, but no, thank you. I see Cole Kmet, Dalton Schultz, like 2 guys I want to avoid at all costs in fantasy leagues this year. The drop off is just so massive at this area of the draft. And you got to it a little bit at the end there, but I just want to harp on one last thing with Jake Ferguson, because the Cowboys, they did the least of any offense this offseason. They literally did nothing. They signed Zeke and Dalvin Cook, complete joke of an offseason for them. And Jake Ferguson is their 2nd receiver. There's only been 3 tight ends over the last 5 years that have had 3 touchdowns in a single game. It's a very short list. It's Travis Kelce, it's George Kittle, and it's Jake Ferguson. In that one playoff game, his best game of the year was his last game in that playoff game. It was a little bit of garbage time touchdowns where they were down by so much in that game, but we could see more of that this season for the Dallas Cowboys, I definitely expect some big weeks, and he was actually really consistent all season long. So yeah, I'm definitely like the Jake Ferguson take, and you want to avoid that teardrop at all costs in leagues. I do not want to be sweating Cole Kmet or Dalton Schultz in my fantasy leagues this year. And Jake Ferguson right around that like round 8 range is, I think, a really good value pick.
Yeah, Njoku's a good one to toss out there too. When I was doing some research in terms of like, oh, how good was Trey McBride over the second half of the year when he became a starter? I was stunned to see that David Njoku was actually the tight end one over those last 8 weeks. And he was like, oh man, and I know a lot of that came with Flacco, but we saw the glimpses, we saw the flash. And if Watson does come through, there is a really, like, I know I kind of shudder at Watson and it scares me, but if you're right on that one and that hits and that's your main guy, like, not a lot of people are going to be super high on that, and it could come out huge for you, especially for David Njoku. That is definitely where maybe you could put Bowers in that conversation just as like the crazy freak rookie, the best prospect to come out in however many years at tight end. But we haven't seen it from him yet. So I love Njoku. That's definitely like right around that Ferguson, Njoku. You don't get in there, you're definitely swimming very high upstream, Taysom Hill and praying for some blow up games, and nobody wants to be in that conversation. But another one that could potentially yield you some of those elite tight end seasons, but not at the elite tight end price right now, is Kyle Pitts. He's been hurting owners since that rookie year. But do you think he turns it around this season?
Yeah, who better to end our bold prediction video this year, Nick, than other than Kyle Pitts? The people are so sick of hearing about Kyle Pitts' upcoming breakout season. I'm seeing comments in my videos about Kyle Pitts. We're done with the 6th straight year of Kyle Pitts breaking out this season. But I think he is the most misunderstood tight end in all of fantasy football. And I love to see those comments, because that's the exact type of thinking that's driving him down draft boards and making him, a reasonable cost this year. And it's not the 6th straight year of doing this for Kyle Pitts. This is Kyle Pitts' 4th season in the NFL. And guess what he's done in every single year he's been in the league? He is ranked top 2 among tight ends in air yards. And really, the reason for this is he doesn't play tight end. He really plays wide receiver. He's a wide receiver that you get to play in the tight end slot. Just like Taysom Hill is a running back that you get to play in the tight end slot, Kyle Pitts is a wide receiver that you get to play in the tight end slot. The problem for Kyle Pitts, since he's entered the league, is not the volume. The volume's been there. He's ranked top 2 among tight ends in air yards. Last year, he led all tight ends in air yards. There was no tight end with more opportunity than Kyle Pitts from a pure air yards perspective. The problem was he didn't turn enough of those air yards into actual yards, into actual touchdowns, because he was coming off the field in the red zone. Jonnu Smith had twice as many red zone targets as Kyle Pitts last season. Absolutely insane. He's obviously on the Dolphins now. He's out of town. Kyle Pitts is not going to be coming off the field in the red zone this season. And then the other problem is just horrible inaccuracy. He's out there with bottom 5 quarterback play really his entire NFL career. And that is not going to be the case this year, not only with Kirk Cousins, but we got a good rookie quarterback right behind him. If Kirk Cousins off the ACL, at 35 years old, isn't able to put it together, there's going to be at minimum a better quarterback than Kyle Pitts has ever played with his entire career, basically this entire season. There's no more tight end competition. And he's the clear wide receiver too on the Falcons. I mean, the drop off in wide receivers is pretty extreme. It goes, Drake London, who I also am in on this season, Darnell Mooney. I think Kyle Pitts will be ahead of Darnell Mooney. I don't even know who's the Cardell Hodge, or it's Ray McLeod, I think. On that team. I mean, Kyle Pitts is like truthfully wide receiver 2 that you get to play in your tight end slot, which is just a huge advantage, I think, in fantasy football. I really think he could finish as the tight end 1 overall in fantasy football with more touchdowns, with more accuracy. And this could be the last year we really get to get him at this price. So yeah, I'm in on Kyle Pitts. I think he's a great sleeper pick. And I think he's going to finish as a top 3 tight end in fantasy football this year. That's the bold prediction for me to end the show. Definitely interested if you're in or out on Kyle Pitts this season.
Oh, man, he is such a polarizing guy, but I am ready to be hurt again, and hopefully I'm not, and I'm with you that I don't think we're going to be hurt. All the reasons you mentioned are phenomenal. It actually is so crazy to think that I saw this. I think it was Pat Thorman who tweeted this one out, that at this age, Travis Kelce had not even caught his first career pass yet. So, yeah, I get we've had some up and downs, and it's been ugly. Largely, I don't think Kyle Pitts' fault here, but ultimately – we hadn't even seen Travis Kelce on an NFL field, and we've gotten all this out of the system potentially for Kyle Pitts. Zach Robinson comes in, and he's not going to be in that ugly rotation of Arthur Smith, who we're seeing do it to Pat Freiermuth already in the way he's moving things around. So I think between the play caller upgrades, there's a lot of talk that, I mean, maybe they're using Kyle Pitts as like a Puka Nacua style after the catch, get him those layup targets, move him into the slot. Like that's what Zach Robinson could be bringing to the table. And that you cannot overstate how much better either Kirk Cousins or Michael Penix, just either one of them is going to be so dramatically improved. So if we just looked at the athletic profile, pretended he was a rookie, is Travis Kelce coming to the NFL, walking in with Kirk Cousins in a what we expect to be a much improved called game, I see it. I see the narrative. My only quibbles with him is that he goes like oftentimes before George Kittle. And I just see like Ayuk maybe not playing for some of this season or potentially even still getting dished out there. So I just have so much faith in George Kittle that I haven't landed a ton of Pitts, but anytime he slips, certainly if Pitts go or some ways, because I do fully buy into the fact that this guy has not shown his best. He has not been set up for success. And this year it could totally change. So I'm very excited to see what he does. It's so polarizing, but man,
there's definitely certain draft rooms that you'll find yourself in if you just getting in the right draft with enough Kyle Pitts haters, because there's so many out there that there's certain draft rooms where he becomes just one of the clearest values in the draft. At ESPN, especially right now, he's going out to the top 70 picks on ESPN.
Oh, come on.
I thought he was closer to 65. It's toughest to get him on Sleeper right now, where he's inside the top 50 picks. So definitely a wide range across the platforms that you're drafting on. But yeah, I totally agree. With Jake Ferguson and Njoku, and also just some of those middle round receivers and quarterbacks that I like going after with Kyler Murray and some of the receivers going in that range. I'm not going to reach for Kyle Pitts, but anytime Kyle Pitts has fallen to round 6 or 7, I'm going to be strongly considering him in that range. And it's part of the reason I kind of have a little bit of a fade on the early tight ends this season, because I know I can wait on Pitts and Ferguson, and I get so panicked as we get closer to that tight end tier that I'm almost always going to get one of those guys before the tier drops.
Yeah, even Evan Ingram, you can toss him into that conversation. I had originally been hammer elite tight ends in that round 4 or 5 range. And I still think, Mark Andrews round 5, like where this guy's going round 2. And I don't see a lot changing other than the fact that they might be forced to throw more. So I'm not opposed to it. But when you dive into these guys, the Fergusons, the Pitts, and even like Evan Ingram, the second most receptions by a tight end of all time last season, and just caught 2 touchdowns in the preseason, gets a little bit of that to bounce his way. And suddenly he's working his way right up into the top 3. So there's a lot of narratives in this pocket. Certainly, I think the biggest takeaway is you can't leave your draft without trying to get by that David Njoku. You got to get somebody, or else you are going to be scrambling. But I've gotten Kyle Pitts at like 70 on some underdog even, because there you do get, like you said, you get in a room with enough haters and he is just plummeting. And when you get him there, it's awesome. It's beautiful. Like there is a world. I don't think it's true, but Drake London, I like the guy. Very, very solid player. One of my favorite picks this year, too, especially round 3 in redraft. But who's to say that Kyle Pitts, if he gets everything all together, like isn't the actual number 1 there? Doesn't even have to be to have success, but like there is definitely a world where he might be a more dangerous weapon than Drake London. And if you get that at your tight end position, like
he had almost as many air yards as Drake London last season. And it's interesting you say that, too, because I like Drake London and Bijan as well. I think people that sort of understand the resurgence coming for the Falcons are in on all 3 of these guys. But the difference between Drake London and Bijan and Pitts is Pitts' price hasn't changed, right? Well, London's price is in round 3. Bijan, you got to spend a first-round pick on, which I'm down to do. I like London in round 3 also, but I also don't really like getting 2 of those 3 guys. I don't really want to make a systemic whole bet of my fantasy team on just the Falcons on a 35-year-old, or it might even be older than 35-year-old quarterback coming off the Achilles. But yeah, Pitts is just the easiest to get of those 3 too. So I've been finding myself getting the most of him compared to Bijan in London.
I know, and it is there's no guarantee Robinson is like McVay, but if he is, it's always so concentrated. It's a great pie, and it's always only designed to feed like 3 to 4 tops mouths. And it would seem that he's going to be one of the biggest ones there. So ultimately, huge fan of him. We did get a super chat, and I don't know if you have any time to hammer questions. I'm happy to answer a few questions with you.
Let's get some of the comments for sure.
Absolutely. Let's do it. But thank you again, guys, so much for being here. Let's hit some mailbag. And thank you so much for the super chat here, Dragon. Tchaikovsky, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, but thank you again for the support. He's got the number 2 in PPR, pros and cons on Breece Hall, 2nd overall. Whew, that's a pretty loaded one. Do you want to kick it off, Sam?
Yeah, look, I'm fine with it, honestly. I'm not gonna tell anyone. I'm not gonna talk anyone in fantasy football this year out of drafting Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, or Bijan Robinson for a lot of the reasons we've already discussed on this live today. I think there's so much value in the middle rounds of receivers where I posted a video a couple weeks back of how I think the first round should go, and I personally have it McCaffrey, Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Bijan, then Brees, and then Jefferson. That's how I have it. And you can debate some of those receivers, Jefferson, Chase, and Amon-Ra. But I also, I won't knock you for going Brees or Bijan at 2 or 3 overall, because there's such a small group of running backs that can really be the league-breaking, fantasy league-winning seasons that you need. And again, I think it ends at Achane, who we talked about too. And you can even pair Brees with Achane potentially at this pick. So I think the con is just the opportunity cost of Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb. That's ultimately the con. But I think you can make up for it with some of the receiver value late. Just draft Ladd McConkey in round 9 and you're going to be fine. So yeah, I think that's my pros and cons. I'm interested what you think too, Nick.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it here. The pro is the market and the way it plays out, where it is so thin in terms of quote unquote legendary running backs, the guys that define a season. There are maybe 3 of them, and you named them: Christian McCaffrey, Brees Hall, Bijan. And I do have Brees Hall above Bijan myself. I think it's 2 guys that see vastly improved fantasy ecosystems, but we've already seen Brees Hall be the running back 2 in a horrendous situation. And now he gets Aaron Rodgers, a line that goes from a bottom 5 one to top 10 in Pro Football Focus's preseason rankings. Like, I'm so excited. And plus, he was injured last year and still squeaked that out by the end of the season, the way he was rumbling. So I love Brees Hall. He's my number 4 player, but I do have the top 3 ranked very similar to you in Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, and Tyreek Hill. I would just say it depends, Dragon. How I would define this pick is if it's a 2-receiver league or a 3-receiver league plus a flex. That's going to make a big difference in a PPR format. When you look at what CeeDee Lamb did, I kind of hinted at this when we were talking about Ferguson. The first half of the year, wide receiver 14, this offense not really cooking, nothing overly special. Second half of the year, this guy averaged 28.9 fantasy points per game once they turned it on. That would have been almost 3 more points than what Cooper Kupp did in that legendary season when he had the most fantasy points per game of all time. So, and I don't really see any reason why that can't be the case this year with no other weapons around him. I just think passing on CeeDee Lamb, especially in a full PPR league, is a pretty big opportunity cost, especially if you start 3 receivers in a flex. If it's only 2 receivers and a flex, I think you could probably get by on some of these mid-round to round 10 type of guys are phenomenal. But man, like passing up on that epic type of ceiling from a wide receiver in a full PPR is a tough sell. But that being said, too, I love Brees Hall. I think he is definitely the best threat to being that number 1 running back this year. And the way the market is set up,
I think it's a great point. Great point about the league settings. Actually, I posted a video this morning. I posting daily videos on the Walter Picks TikTok and Instagram feeds. But one of the video I posted today was the most common mistakes people make in drafts, the 3 most common mistakes. And number 2 was just not understanding your roster and league scoring settings. Because like you said, it's such a different game if you got to start 3 versus 2 receivers. Dramatically different strategy. Yeah. Where I think there's way bigger opportunity cost if that's the case in this league. And it's one of the hardest things I feel like as a fantasy analyst and content creator. Sometimes when you're making content, you don't know all the roster settings and league settings. That's part of the reason that the Walter Picks app is so powerful, because you can sync your league settings and roster settings and get insights custom to that. So definitely encourage you to try out the app too, if you're in a bunch of different leagues with different settings. But yeah, definitely a very good point there.
Yeah, you got to know those settings. And that's why, it's such a powerful tool to be able to fill it like that. But good luck making the choice again. I don't think you can go too wrong. You can be a little more right. I think we laid out a good enough cases for both why you should and should not go Brees Hall. And best of luck in that draft there, Dragon. We got Josh saying, please speak on Ja'Marr Chase for drafting in PPR. I'll take this one because I don't have a popular stance on Ja'Marr Chase. And I know nobody has had more 50-point days than Ja'Marr Chase. Nobody can blow up a week quite like this guy. And Joe Burrow's about to be healthy. We think, at least right now. But man, I'm nervous about him. And this was before the holdout. And who knows how that goes? Who knows if he actually does suit up for week 1? But even assuming he does and he's ready to go and he's not starting slow because of the missed practice time, which I think is a big leap, a big assumption that you'd have to make, that there's no lingering effects to not practicing at all right now. But let's assume everything's perfect. He still has been very, very inconsistent, more than you'd realize for a guy that has the talent he has. Ultimately, I'm going to pull it up real quick in my draft guide here. Only $10 for anybody out there that's interested in checking it out. And I just published an article if you want a free preview of all my round one picks. But I wrote about Ja'Marr Chase, and again, the 50-point ceilings are insane, but he's been just a top 12 receiver in only 33% of his games since coming in the league, top 24 in just 44%. So that means 56% of his games have been outside the top 25, and a lot of them have been well outside the top 25. And I look at this, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, especially if it's a full PPR league, but in his season last year, 21.1 points per game. With Joe Burrow, Chase averages 18.35 points per game. So, yeah, again, it's very easy to say, okay, well, we still haven't seen the best of Burrow and Chase as a duo. If T. Higgins was gone, I'd feel a lot better about this being a steadier situation. But to me, when I look at like Jefferson versus Chase versus Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chase is shockingly the third on that list for me, and I know he's number one for most people. I don't know if you have a more pro stance on Chase than I do. I know it's not a popular take, but I'd love to hear yours.
We've actually, in the Walter Picks app, we've had those three ranked, Justin Jefferson, then Amon-Ra, then Chase, really all offseason. And then now you throw in the, it seems every day there's a bigger and bigger risk of Chase actually not playing in week one. Right now, my gut puts it at like a 70-30 chance that he plays. Like, I still think it's likely he plays. It's pretty unprecedented for these guys to take the fines and miss games. And it's really, it's bad for both parties, right? Ja'Marr Chase is going to lose hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and the Bengals are just going to lose games. Like, this is what happens if he holds out. So they're most likely going to find some solution that makes both parties happy, and he'll be out there week one, which I think is where, I was just on a live stream earlier today too, and there's so many Ja'Marr Chase comments, everyone's starting to panic a little bit. And Schefter himself sort of hinted at Chase, maybe being the most concerning holdout player like a few days ago. And that's definitely something to take note of when he does something like that. So yeah, I definitely think there's some real concern he misses week one. I still don't think it's likely, but yeah, Amon-Ra's a way higher weekly floor, similar weekly ceiling. I think Justin Jefferson's the best receiver in the NFL, and I'm willing to bet on him being quarterback proof. I've had that take really all offseason. The JJ McCarthy injury, I don't think helped Justin Jefferson, but it didn't really change sort of my take on him altogether. I think Darnold will be at least as good as Nick Mullins. And if not, Nick Mullins will be at least as good as Nick Mullins was last year for Jay Jettas, and he'll average over 20 points per game again, like he did in that stretch. So, and like we've already talked about, several times at this point too, that part of drafts, like just take Jahmyr Gibbs and Saquon and then hammer the middle round receivers. I think that's fine. Ja'Marr Chase definitely can win leagues, but there's enough risk there, and around where he's going, I'm okay going elsewhere.
Wow, I'm pumped to see that we're aligned here. It's been a very rare to find somebody who has Chase the third of those three wide receivers with me. I typically get completely bashed for that take, but hey, we're aligned on this one. So hopefully that gives you some info there, Josh, on who to go with round one and where you're picking from, for sure. Chris T, great to see you. I do, of course, remember you. Glad you got the A+ from Yahoo. Just because for the sake of time, we got a good amount of questions here. So reading the whole lineup right now, just shoot me a DM, Chris, on Twitter. I'd be happy to give you a grade, but these are kind of tough to do live on air when we have a few questions to hit, and I do got to get running to an open house. I appreciate you making a little time earlier for me, Sam, bumping this up here. As well. But we do have Ravi commenting and saying, "What up, Sam?" So, what up, Ravi? Is he a regular of yours there?
Sure, yeah.
Oh yeah, let's go, Ravi. Hell yeah. Hopefully you like the bold predictions here. It was great, great meeting you. I got McConkey on my bench as well. So yeah, Chris, I saw that roster you sent, by the way, and just a quick snap look at it. I thought it was at minimum of B+, potentially an A lineup. I want to read it a little deeper before we just buzz off and don't give it to you. I really like what I saw from what you got there. So Connor Torn on a keeper league. Don't know if I should keep Lamar, Devontae Adams, or Mixon. These ones are always tricky. I assume there's no cost to keeping them when people don't include them, but that of course changes the factors here. To me, if it's a best player available here, it's not Mixon. I'm going to just cross him off this list, and it comes down to Adams or Jackson for me. And I think I lean Adams. I know there's a lot of concern over him. It's also tough to know if this is standard versus PPR in the standard league with no, which those leagues don't really exist anymore, other than, of course, the TFA league that we do. I have no idea what's going on with that one. One of us has to win that, Sam, so we can please change the PPR settings for the love of God. But in that type of format, Lamar Jackson would be the guy. in my opinion. But
Yeah,
I think
I usually just look up the underdog ADP and I select
yeah.
like basically off that. And yeah, here it's Devontae Adams for sure.
It's got to be Adams. Yeah, I agree. Unless you don't get any points for receptions, we could we could cross that off. Here's a bold prediction: Marvin Harrison finishes a top 3 receiver. Whew, love that one, Krana. I think it's not. I mean, it's bold, no doubt, but it's not unreasonable given the talent, the profile, the vacated available volume there. I love Marv. What are your thoughts on Marv? Is he like your top second round receiver right now? Because it is a tricky range.
Yeah, we got him right after Puka, right before Drake London. I think that's where he deserves to be. So that puts him at wide receiver 9, 14th overall for us. I've been taking him in some of the best ball drafts, probably have like around 10% exposure. So he's doing pretty, at ADP. And I think that 12 spot in those best ball drafts was really brutal this year. But yeah, I think this is a reasonable hot take. And I was actually, I like Malik Neighbors more at cost. I'm willing to, buy into a scary Daniel Jones-led offense just based on the talent profile and volume projection. Like Neighbors has, I think, an even clearer path with 30% target share than Marvin Harrison has. Like the gap between Neighbors and the next best player in the Giants, I think the only other team you could point to that has a bigger gap is the Cowboys with CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah.
But even Lamb at least has Jake Ferguson, and then what is Jalen Tolbert or Doubt, like Rico Dowdle, right? It's like insane. But it's just so much with the Giants. It goes from Neighbors to Darius Slayton or Wan'Dale Robinson. I mean, it's really, really crazy stuff going on that team where he's just so by far the best player in the offense. Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm in on as well. Just don't like him as much at cost. But I was looking at Odell Beckham Jr.'s rookie season when I was doing some analysis on Neighbors. Odell was number 1 in points per game his rookie season. He just only played 12 games. So there actually is a precedent of a rookie receiver coming in and finishing top 3. If Odell finished that season healthy, he would have been top 3. So it's certainly possible. And yeah, don't hate this bold prediction at all. I do think there's still a decent fraction of the NFL fan base that just doesn't quite realize the prospects we're getting with both Marvin Harrison and with Malik Neighbors as well.
I know it's absolutely. For whatever the record on there, I love Malik Neighbors too in round 4, but I'm not opposed to Marv Harrison at all in round 2 either. But I'm with you. Like that gap is way too wide. I love Malik Neighbors this year. 33% target share coming right up. He's going to be an absolute stud, but so is Marv. I love this prediction, Krana. Great to see you. He also, shocker, as a Bears fan, says Caleb Williams is a QB5. Jaden Daniels is a QB3, though. Okay, he's even giving Daniels the leg up there on him. I wonder if you read the draft guide over there, Krana, and fell in love with Daniels. I've been on love with him all season. I love these predictions. I think it is a class that's getting really hyped up for its rookie rookie receivers and rookie QBs. The running backs are supposed to be not quite the strength of this class, but the QBs and receivers it's known as one of the best classes there is on there. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. This is a great question in terms of Ray Davis versus Bucky Irving and just the general bench running back conversation. So Sam, I'll toss this to you. Who do you like better of those two? But then also, like, now that we have Jordan Mason as a potential handcuff with CMC, Eli Mitchell down for the year, Marshawn Lloyd now with AJ Dillon done for the year, Samaje Perine going to the Chiefs right now. There's so many intriguing rookie versus other veterans that are now landing in interesting spots. There's a lot of interesting stash running backs right now, even if it's not the best of running back classes. So between these two, who do you love? And is there of all these other names too, is there somebody else you like even more than these two? I guess is the question.
Yeah, so I think that the highest upside handcuff in all of fantasy this year is Blake Corum. Like pretty clearly, he's an injury away from just being a top 5 running back, but he's definitely a little bit more expensive. Like people understand that to some extent. You got to take him, I think, right around round 10. This is also part of the reason I really like if you go with the RB strategy, I'm not going to take a running back again, till round 9 or 10, but then like round 11, I'm just going to be smashing running back for like round 11 through 15, getting all these high upside handcuffs. So I really like that strategy because I think like a lot of these handcuffs have higher ceiling than a lot of these running backs going in the middle rounds. The Devin Singletaries, the Ramondre Stevensons, the Zamir Whites, who just don't have a path to a huge touchdown ceiling and a huge receiving ceiling, where some of these handcuffs are an injury away from that. I think Bucky Irving is an injury away from that. I lean Bucky Irving over Ray Davis here. I could see the argument of the Bills offense being more exciting, but definitely there's, Josh Allen at the goal line is a huge threat. And this is been the problem with James Cook. He's been incredibly efficient. He just hasn't scored touchdowns because Josh Allen scores all of the rushing touchdowns for the Bills. I do think James Cook is a really good receiving back too, who's like just not going to be overtaken in this backfield. So you need an injury for Ray Davis. I'm not sure you really do need an injury for Bucky Irving. I think there's at least a path to him just being a straight up better early down back than Rachaad White who's kind of an interesting pick though for the Bucks because Bucky Irving's also like one of, he's actually better receiving back than a running back, and that's exactly where Rachaad White's really good at. So an interesting pick there from the Bucks, but Rachaad White was so inefficient on the ground last season, like all the Bucks running backs were, that I think there's a path there for Bucky Irving. I think there's also just a path to like a real goal line role that you just kind of can't have in a Josh Allen offense. So yeah, I think I'd lean Bucky Irving here. But yeah, Jordan Mason, certainly one of the highest upside handcuffs. Tyler Algier is on that list for sure as well. I think those are some of the biggest names. I do like actually have this list here in front of me. I was just talking about this on the live a second ago. I also think I had Ray Davis. Oh, the other one, we already talked about Jalen Wright. He's definitely really good.
That's mine.
The other one, I mentioned this on the Breece Hall comment, but Braylon Allen is the other. Like, I honestly think it might go Blake Corum, then Braylon Allen, just in terms of like upside handcuffs for the rookies this season. Braylon Allen's only 20 years old, which is absolutely insane to me. I mean, he was playing in college and dominating at 17 years old, which is absolutely incredible in the sport of football. He's already earned the running back 2 role. He's apparently been better at catching passes than perceived, in the drafts too. So if Breece Hall goes down, I think Braylon Allen can win leagues too. There's just so many league winner handcuffs that are injury away. But yeah, I think in this question specifically, I'd lean Bucky Irving, but I also think I liked the profile for Davis a little bit more coming out. So it's definitely close.
Yeah, it is really close. It's really tight. We actually talked about both these guys last night, X-Roll Route 4 on our sleeper show. Both of them were highlighted as guys we love to draft. I actually ultimately lean Davis on this one because I get that Josh Allen is the ultimate goal line vulture. We also saw Latavius Murray finish top 12 in goal line attempts last year, which is just absolutely asinine. They just don't want to use James Cook there. He had one more carry than Damian Harris, who only played 6 games, I think, maybe even less than that last year. And still, James Cook only had one more goal line carry than Damian Harris, never mind the 13 they gave to Latavius Murray. And so if we get Ray Davis in that role, much more efficient, great at getting by his blockers, that short, stocky frame is just like perfect for that goal line role. I could see standalone like 8 to 10 touchdown upside. And then if something happened to him, but I fully agree with you too, that Bucky Irving has that path to maybe take over as the lead rusher. Was it Garrett Breer who said he's looking like Kyron Williams in this Ram-inspired Liam Cohen scheme when he visited the camp there, the way he's getting up and going. And that's the exact opposite of what Rachaad White does. I know that was a question we got here. Like, what do you think of Rachaad White? I'm worried about him. I do think like he's getting a little too dumped on. I know that like the rushing success rate, the EPA were all so low, but every single Bucks running back was so low in that. So I think it was more of a line issue than it was a Rachaad White issue. Now they get that first round center in there who's just been blowing people off the ball this offseason. So I think Rachaad White's getting a little too disrespected. I don't love him in round 3 and redraft where he goes, because that's where you can get Nico Collins, Drake London, get the elite quarterback edge that you were hinting at that I love to do as well. So I don't end up with him a ton in redraft, but in best ball where he's kind of falling around 6 right now, I mean, a guy that had the second most touches in the league. I am a little worried about Bucky Irving being a great running back and vulturing in some of that volume. But I still think Rachaad White's definitely going a little too cheap because he's one of the most elite receiving backs that we have in the league right now. And that's going to always help him preserve some value. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Rachaad White?
Yeah, I feel pretty torn because he's typically, like you said, I mean, the receiving profile is what I want to target. Like generally, when I'm evaluating running backs for fantasy, I kind of only care about 2 things: the touchdown ceiling and the receiving profile. And I just don't see a huge touchdown ceiling for Rachaad White because I think there's a decent chance Bucky Irving is just the preferred goal line back out of the gates. The receiving profile is really strong though. So in PPR formats, like if he falls far enough, I'll definitely consider him. Certainly clicked on him a few times in the best ball drafts, but like at cost, I definitely prefer Bucky Irving at round 15, 16 to Rachaad White in round 3. And like I'm going early running backs in round 1, 2. I'm almost never going to be considering him in round 3. So I think I lean towards being out on Rachaad White, but I agree with you. It is really hard to decipher. Is he just an inefficient runner or was it just a horrible scheme because all of the running backs were inefficient? It's almost impossible to know, but it's at least a little concerning, that he's had such bad efficiency. So I am willing to knock him a little bit for that and be a little bit scared.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have the same exact take. We have a lot of same takes today, Sam, which I love. A sharp mind like you and me, I love when we're lined up like that. It makes me feel better about my own takes. And we briefly touched upon Corum. He's my number one handcuff too. Absolutely a league winner if things bounce the right way. And if they're actually putting Kyron Williams on punts, I mean, that is nuts to me. I don't know if that's actually true or what's going to happen there, but it certainly opens up the chance of an injury even that much more. And maybe that does open up a few more just standalone drives for Blake Corum as well. We got the GOAT Sam here from Lynchy 781. Absolutely a GOAT for sure. No doubt about it. We have just a couple more quick ones to wrap up. I'd say I got to get out of here in like 2 to 3 minutes. So let's see what we can wrap up here. What are your thoughts on Brooks, though? Because that is a new one that kind of popped up with he's going to miss at least the first 4 weeks.
Yeah,
are you worried? Are you out on this guy now?
I can take this one quickly. I think if your league is an IR slot, I do not mind drafting Jonathan Brooks at all. He's going like a little early for me. Like there's league winning receivers, I think, like around that spot. You're taking him over Brian Thomas, over Rome Odunze sometimes in drafts where he's going. So you do have to pay, a reasonable price to get him. But the way I'm approaching Jonathan Brooks just in general in fantasy this season, before the news about the pup, but definitely after the news if he's going to miss the first 4 games, is like I do not expect to start Jonathan Brooks on my fantasy teams for at least the first half of the season. Like I really don't think you should build your team sort of with that mindset. The entire reason to draft Jonathan Brooks is for a Todd Gurley-like rookie season where he just smashes in the fantasy football playoffs. And I think he can definitely do that. And I do expect him to be 100% healthy in the second half of the season. I do expect him to get a really good chance to get 20 plus touches a game in an offense that maybe will be better than we expect. But even if it's not 20 plus touches a game, we saw that in rookie season for Saquon. In a bad offense, it can go just fine. And like that really is the type of profile Jonathan Brooks has, is a potentially, a little bit worse version of Saquon Barkley. Like I think that's the ceiling for Brooks when he's fully healthy, is a slightly worse version of rookie Saquon, which is pretty exciting. And if you can get him for cheap, stash him on your IR, like he absolutely can win leagues down the stretch. And again, when I'm drafting, I want to click on guys that can win my fantasy league. I think Jonathan Brooks is on that list. The price is a little bit expensive for a guy you're not going to get any production out of in the first half of the season. I really like pairing him with Jerome Ford. I think that is a really smart pairing if you're taking him and you didn't go 2 running backs early. Jerome Ford's one of the most slept on late round running backs in PPR right now. He had almost 10 points, at least 10 points in almost every game last season. Nick Chubb's going to be out for probably longer than Jonathan Brooks is out. So I think that pairing's really smart. Obviously, Chuba Hubbard's going late too if you want to do that. But yeah, I generally like Jonathan Brooks. I think this running back class was a little overhated, which is suppressed some of their values too. But just don't plan on him for the first half of the season is my general advice.
I think it's a phenomenal take. I'm fully aligned with you. The fact that we do have those 2 types of bridges too late in Ford and Chuba Hubbard, just buying the Carolina running back 1 for a 100 overall and a 130 overall pick, and a Dave Canales offense that loves to feed the running back. He's already said I'm going to be stubborn with the run. I think it could be a great move, especially the way they beefed up that offensive line too. So I'm fully with it, especially if you have the IR spot. It's tricky when you don't. It's just a big roster-eating spot for however long he's out. But
I don't think I would take him if I didn't have an IR slot.
No, it's really tough to pull off otherwise. But ultimately, when you have that spot, I think they're just being abundantly cautious with this guy. And when he hits the ground running, like fresh week 4 or 5, and some of these guys are already kind of dinged up and playing, like this is the type of rookie that just comes in and goes nuts. I love it. I'm definitely buying him at this now depressed price cost, especially when you have 2 great bridges that you already mentioned there. We'll wrap up, I think, with another super chat. Thank you again, Dragon, for another one. He was kind of hinting at that he had that same exact thoughts and pointed out that it was 2 wide receivers in a flex. So ultimately, it does change things. I think you still got to know what you're passing up on in Tyreek Hill, and especially CeeDee Lamb, and that legendary potential season in a full PPR. The upside he has is so massive that I still think I'm going CeeDee Lamb there. But especially with these roster settings, it is that much closer, especially with those wide receivers available to you in the mid rounds. I fully get it with a drop off at running back is much more steep, but the drop off from CeeDee Lamb from like the wide receiver 1 to the wide receiver 12 is also quite steep. Like it's a different ball game. Like this isn't even a wide receiver. It's a 200 touch guy type of situation at receiver in my eyes. So you're not going to go wrong. You could be more right. I think I still ultimately would go Lamb with the number 2 overall pick in a PPR league. What about you? Who's your final, like in this type of settings now that we know it's 2 wide receivers in the flex? You taking the running back or you going CeeDee Lamb or Tyreek?
Yeah, honestly, I think I'm fine going Breece in this situation. I feel like I'm better to manipulate the draft with 2 early running backs. I'm cool going Breece over Lamb in a league like this. And that means I might not get any CeeDee Lamb or Tyreek Hill, which is a little scary. But yeah, I'm fine going Breece. I think I would disagree with you here and go Breece if there's only 2 receivers.
Absolutely. And I'm fully Javonte over Zamir. I think that's an easy one for me. I don't know if you feel any different there. And the only other question here is first time keeper league. If I keep Nico Collins round 9, does that change your early draft? Not really. I mean, it's just great to know you have such a good value in your back pocket. I do think it makes me just a little bit more likely to take that running approach that I think I'm going to be going anyways. But ultimately, yeah, you already have your wide receiver one, and you can load up around him from there. Why not get 2 elite running backs if you can? Does it change your approach at all? You're just kind of like, I have this great value in my back pocket. Let's go.
Yeah, no, I think exactly what you said. And honestly, the bigger thing with keeper leagues that changes my approaches is sometimes who other people take, because it can change just the amount of guys in specific tiers sometimes, especially at the running back position where there's so few in that top tier. So I would almost look more at who other people are keeping. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, I'm just a little more likely to go running back, but you got him at such a cheap price. It really shouldn't affect too much.
No, not at all. Yeah, there's a great point too. Like, who keeps what in our draft? I got kind of screwed with that. I didn't really notice how few running backs there were, and it's hideous right now for me. Didn't really study the league settings or what was being kept. I would do Kamara and Godwin for Pacheco, especially when you have a deep bench like him. Would you sign off on that trade?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable deal. I'm a little bit scared about Kamara, and Pacheco is about as safe of a floor as you can get right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like Godwin. I like Kamara, but yeah, Pacheco, I think is
a good one to end on here. Good one to end on. I think we're going to agree on this one.
Yeah, Jalen Wright for Vidal. I go Jalen Wright 10 out of 10 times there.
Yeah.
And I don't even hate Vidal. It's not a bad one, but yeah, I'm going Jalen Wright every single time there.
Yeah, if there's anyone that's going to be this year's Devon Achane, it is Jalen Wright, just so clearly.
It's the explosive guy in the same exact offense, but the skill set that let Devon Achane thrive. Right. It's such easy math. Like, let's just line up the exact type of same player. He just needs the opportunity, and if and when it comes, he's my highest exposed player in best ball right now. I think I have like 30% or so. I've been just hammering
way too much. Yeah, my highest exposure guys this year are all under 23%. I got burned bad by Tim Patrick last year, before the season even started. I've adjusted my exposures a lot this year, which we'll see how that goes. It can work out well if Jalen Wright hits, obviously, but
if he comes through, it'll be huge. He's the only one I'm really above, even like 20% too. I have much flatter exposure. He was just a guy I couldn't stop hitting because of the Devon Achane. Like, it's the exact same narrative. Why not go for it yet again? Awesome. Well, Sam, thank you so much. This was such a blast going through our bold predictions as we do every year. Why don't you pump anything you'd like to with the app, with any content, anything you guys are creating that you'd like to hit? Let's hear it for the crew.
Yeah, you can follow me at Walter Picks on TikTok and Instagram. Download the Walter Picks app. It's a free app that you can download on both iOS and Android. There are some premium subscriptions that are well worth the price as well. But yeah, that's all the things to plug. Walter Picks app and at Walter Picks on social.
Definitely check those out. And I'm at RotoStreet Wolf on Twitter is where I get most of my content going. But we have rotostreetjournal.com, which is our website where I'm churning out a ton of content. Our writers are awesome. But the biggest thing I would say is that if you're hitting that draft season this weekend, rotostreetjournal.com/draft guide, one word. And it's also at the top of the menu too. If you just go to the homepage, only $10. I just want to get it out to as many people as I can. I've had a lot of people messaging in. They'd pay 20, they'd pay 30 for it. I'm not just saying that to try to hype it up. It's just so appreciated the kind feedback I'm getting on it. And I really do think round by round, my targets, my fades, the fantasy soul this year. I do it every year. I've been getting such great reception on it though this season. So if you want to know all the guys I'm going after, all the guys I'm fading, the why, the who, the what, rotostreetjournal.com/draft guide. It means the world to support a small fantasy brand like us. Any support would mean anything. And free way to support us is that thumbs up on your way out, guys. Thank you again so much. The likes, the subs, anything of that nature as we head on out. Sam, my man, best of luck this fantasy season. This is going to be the year. I know neither of us have made those best ball finals, but we're going to see each other in there 1 and 2. Who knows who's going to be at the top? But I'm pumped. This is going to be the season.
Have a good one, Nick. Fun as always.
Awesome. See you, brother.